What happens when a young boy from the streets saves the daughter of a powerful CEO? A moment of courage changes his life forever, but as he steps into a world of wealth and opportunity, he must decide. Will he forget where he came from, or use his newfound power to change the lives of others? Jamal Johnson was just 15, but life had already taught him more lessons than most adults. He lived in a cramped apartment with his single mother and 2 younger siblings in a tough neighborhood, where danger was never too far away. The walls of their home were thin, and the noise from the street often made it hard to focus on anything. But Jamal had learned to tune it all out. His days started early, helping his mom with chores before heading out to find odd jobs, anything that would earn him a little extra money. He'd shovel snow, mow lawns, or run errands for neighbors. Even in a world that sometimes seemed against him, Jamal was determined to make a difference. He wasn't looking for fame or fortune, just enough to ensure his family didn't go without. At school, he was often distracted, thinking about how to make ends meet, but he never let it show. His teachers saw a smart kid with potential, but they also knew the streets were calling to him. Despite the odds, Jamal held on to a dream. One day, he would escape this neighborhood. He dreamed of becoming something more than just another statistic, and he imagined a life where his mom didn't have to worry about bills, where his siblings could grow up with opportunities he never had. But for now, Jamal focused on the present, doing whatever it took to survive, always hoping that one day, something or someone would come along to change his life forever. It was a hot afternoon, and Jamal was walking home after finishing an errand when he noticed a sleek black car screeching to a halt near the park. The driver, a young woman in her late teens, was frantically trying to escape from the car, but she stumbled and fell into the nearby river. Jamal's heart raced. He knew the current in that part of the river was swift and dangerous, especially with the rain from earlier in the week. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the water. He wasn't a strong swimmer, but he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. As the girl struggled, her cries for help echoing through the park, Jamal dove in, pushing himself through the cold, fast-moving water. His clothes weighed him down and his limbs felt heavy, but he kept going, each stroke closer to her. When he finally reached her, she was panicked and disoriented, her body thrashing as the water tried to pull her under. Jamal grabbed her around the waist, holding her tight as he swam back to shore. The girl gasped for air when they made it to the bank, coughing and shaking. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion and gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, still in shock. Jamal didn't have time for words. He just nodded, exhausted but relieved she was okay. The girl, still shaken, didn't catch his name, nor did she realize who he was. But the look of gratitude in her eyes was enough for Jamal to know he had done the right thing. The next day, Jamal could hardly believe his own exhaustion as he woke up early for another long day of work. But as he stepped out of his apartment, he noticed something strange. A sleek black car parked at the curb, its tinted windows hiding the identity of the passengers inside. Before he could think much of it, a woman approached him. She was wearing a designer suit, and her presence seemed out of place in his neighborhood. "Are you Jamal Johnson?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Jamal nodded, confused. "I'm here on behalf of my employer," she continued. "He wants to speak with you. Please, come with me." Jamal hesitated, unsure what was happening, but the woman's polite insistence made him follow her to the car. He got in, and moments later, he found himself being driven to a luxurious office building in the city. His heart raced, his mind struggling to understand how he'd ended up here. When they arrived, he was ushered into a sleek conference room where the CEO, a powerful, well-dressed man, sat waiting. The CEO smiled at Jamal. "I hear you saved my daughter yesterday," he said. "I'm deeply grateful for your bravery." Jamal was speechless, still processing everything. The CEO continued, "We want to offer you something, an internship at our company, or perhaps a scholarship for your education. You've shown a lot of promise, and I believe we can help you achieve more than you ever imagined." Jamal's mind raced as he tried to understand the gravity of the situation. One moment, he was just a kid trying to survive. The next, he was being handed a chance to change his entire life. Jamal's new life felt like a whirlwind. The office was nothing like the world he had grown up in. Everything was sleek, polished, and full of people dressed in sharp suits. At first, he couldn't help but feel out of place. The people he met in the halls looked at him with curiosity, some with a hint of judgment. He was the new kid, a kid from the streets who didn't quite fit into their world of privilege and power. During meetings, Jamal felt like an outsider. He had never spoken in boardrooms or dressed in designer clothes. His hands still carried the calluses from years of hard work. But despite his discomfort, he was determined to make the most of this opportunity. He worked late, learning everything he could about the company and the world that seemed so foreign to him. But not everyone viewed him with suspicion. A few colleagues, impressed by his grit and intelligence, took him under their wing. They saw past the rough edges and recognized his potential. One of the senior managers even invited him to shadow her on a big project, giving him a chance to show what he could do. At home, the transition was just as difficult. His mother was proud of him, but she couldn't hide her skepticism. She worried about how quickly things had changed for Jamal. "You're not used to people like them," she would warn him. "Don't forget where you come from." His younger siblings were excited, but even they could sense the distance that was beginning to grow between them. Jamal was torn. The opportunities were endless, but the price of change was steep. He wasn't sure if he could balance this new life with the boy he used to be. As the days passed, Jamal found himself in the CEO's office more often, getting guidance that was both overwhelming and enlightening. The CEO, a man with a reputation for demanding excellence, took a personal interest in Jamal's growth. He mentored him, sharing stories of his own humble beginnings and how hard work had shaped his success. But with every lesson came high expectations. "Your work ethic is impressive," the CEO said one afternoon as they went over a new business strategy. "But now it's about more than just effort. It's about results. You need to show the world you're ready to lead, not just follow." Jamal absorbed every word, but the weight of the pressure was starting to settle on his shoulders. He'd gone from struggling to make ends meet to being given a seat at the table, and the responsibility that came with it was immense. The CEO wasn't just offering him a job, he was offering him a future. But it came with a price, a demand for perfection that Jamal wasn't sure he was ready for. At night, Jamal lay awake, replaying the decisions he had to make. Was he still the same boy who saved a stranger out of instinct, or had he become someone who would sacrifice everything to succeed? The internship had opened doors to a world he never dreamed of, but it also pulled him farther away from his old life, his old self. The pressure to succeed, to prove he deserved this chance, was suffocating. Jamal wondered if he could balance both sides of himself, the boy from the neighborhood and the man the CEO was shaping him to become. Weeks passed, and the pressure continued to build. Jamal found himself caught between two worlds. On one hand, the corporate world offered him opportunities he'd never dreamed possible. He was meeting influential people, working on high-profile projects, and gaining experiences that others could only imagine. The future was bright, and the possibilities endless. But on the other hand, his roots, his family, his neighborhood, the values that had shaped him, were calling him back. Jamal couldn't ignore the part of him that still saw the faces of the kids he grew up with, still heard the voices of his mother and siblings, reminding him to stay grounded. He had come from nothing, and now, with all this new power and potential, he was beginning to feel like he was losing touch with the very things that had made him who he was. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, staring out over the city, Jamal thought about everything he had been through. The days of struggle, the chance meeting with the CEO's daughter, the life-changing offer. He thought about how far he had come, and how much further he could go. But he also thought about the kids in his neighborhood who would never get the same opportunities he had. The weight of it all pressed down on him. He had a responsibility now, not just to himself, but to everyone who believed in him. Jamal realized he couldn't forget where he came from. The money, the status, the power. It all mattered, but not more than staying true to his roots. The decision wasn't easy, but Jamal knew what he had to do. He would use his new life to lift up those who needed it most, never forgetting the boy who had once fought to survive. Jamal's decision didn't come overnight, but once it was made, he knew it was the right one. He stood at a crossroads, torn between the glittering corporate world that had opened its doors to him and the humble neighborhood that had shaped his every step. In the end, he realized he didn't have to choose one over the other. He could use the power and influence he had gained to create change, not just for himself, but for those who were still struggling. He began to shift his focus, taking on projects that aimed to improve the community he came from, mentoring at-risk youth, funding educational programs, and supporting local businesses. He used his position in the corporate world to bring attention to the issues people in his neighborhood faced every day, opening doors that had previously been closed to them. With each step forward, Jamal felt more at peace, knowing that his success could help others rise too. The CEO, watching Jamal's growth with pride, called him into his office one afternoon. "I'm impressed," he said, his voice warm. "You're doing exactly what we talked about, using your opportunities for good. You've come a long way, Jamal, and I'm proud to have been part of your journey." Jamal smiled, grateful for the mentorship that had guided him. "It's just the beginning," he replied. "I have a lot more to do." And so, with a heart full of purpose, Jamal stepped forward into his new life. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready. He promised himself he would continue changing lives, not just his own, but the lives of everyone who needed a chance. The boy who once fought to survive was now fighting to make the world better, one life at a time.